Hi everyone, welcome to our presentation. Just to formally introduce myself, my name is Krish Patel, and I'm a solutions architect at AWS. As a solution architect, I serve as a technical guide for our AWS customers in their cloud journey. Today, we will be talking about Amazon Codewhisperer. Amazon Codewhisperer is a general purpose machine learning powered code generator that provides you with the code recommendations in real time. So pretty much as you write code, Codewhisperer automatically generates suggestions based on the code that you write, and then also your existing code and also comments. So today we're going to be talking about a multitude of things. We're going to start off with customer challenges, looking over the service overview in general about Amazon Code Whisperer, the benefits and features of Amazon Code Whisperer, and then lastly going into the demo and getting more hands-on. So starting off, organizations and primarily developers face like a lot of problems when trying to write code for applications. Not only is there a shortage of developers worldwide, developers don't get enough focus time to work on important business problems. Now, what is focus time? Focus time is the time that developers spend on writing code rather than focusing on additional hurdles. In addition to spending a significant portion of their time manually developing code, that is straightforward and undifferentiating. For example, unit tests, string manipulation, processing lists, uploading files. Developers also spend a lot of time exploring, learning, and keeping up with a complex and ever-changing tool and technology landscape. For example, think about new programming languages, SDKs, APIs, frameworks, and their specific versions for it as well. This leaves less time available to develop new creative, differentiated, or business-critical applications. Developers try to overcome this pressure of time by learning from each other and by sharing code through developer forums like Stack Overflow, which often times results in inefficient copying of code that may unintentionally violate open source software copyrights or licenses. Not only does the copy of code allow copyright issues, but it can also cause like software threats, allowing security vulnerabilities to creep into the code base. And that essentially leads to insecure code. With all these challenges in mind that developers face, we came up with Amazon Code Whisperer. So we talked about the challenges that developers are primarily facing. What exactly is Amazon Code Whisperer? Trained on billions and billions of lines of Amazon and open source code, Amazon Code Whisperer is an AI coding companion that helps you quickly write secure code by generating whole line and full function code suggestions in your IDE in real time based on natural language comments and surrounding code. This is something that we covered on the earlier slide. Because Code Whisperer can generate a lot of code for developers, it can accelerate application development and also frees up a lot of time for your developers to focus on more business critical problems rather than looking up something or looking up documentation that they were not able to get before. Also, it creates more time so they can focus on imagining and building rather than searching and finding. With security scans that can be run in the IDE, potential threats can be found and corrected earlier in the application lifecycle, saving a lot of costs, time, and risk of application development. So, how do we really find out that Amazon Code Whisperer is game changing? So, during the preview of the service, Amazon ran a productivity challenge, and participants who used Amazon Code Whisperer were 27% more likely to complete tasks successfully and did so an average of 57% faster than those who did not use Code Whisperer. So, that's really a game changer. Now that we talked about Amazon Code Whisperer, let's talk about how it exactly works. So Codewhisperer works right from the developer's IDE. Developers can download and install the AWS Toolkit IDE extension and start coding. So as you write code in your IDE, Codewhisperer automatically analyzes your code and comments. Codewhisperer understands comments written in natural language, so for example in English, and can generate multiple code suggestions in real time. The service suggests entire functions and logical blocks of code, often up to like I want to say about 10 to 15 lines of code directly in the IDE code editor. The generated code is similar to how you would like write the code, matching your style and then naming conventions as well. You can quickly accept the top suggestion and view more suggestions based off the format that you want. One note to keep in mind is that always review a code suggestion before accepting it, as you may need to edit it to ensure that it is exactly what you need. So we talked about how Amazon Code Whisperer works. Now, what tools does it exactly work with? So despite being a fairly new tool, Code Whisperer is accessible as an extension from VS Code and IntelliJ and other JetBrains IDEs, and natively available on AWS Cloud 9, Lambda, SageMaker Studio, and Jupyter. Today, Code Whisperer provides full function support for Python, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, C Sharp, and etc. Code Whisperer is also a fairly new service that's been recently being implemented. We started off supporting 3 coding languages and expanded since then. Keeping this in mind, we're constantly innovating and developing features and capabilities for Codewhisperer on a period-by-period basis, best for our users and best for our customers. Now that we've talked about the compatibility of Codewhisperer, let's move on to the outlining benefits of the service. So first and foremost, Codewhisperer helps with developer productivity. So you're able to accelerate any coding task. So think about your code suggestions that you're getting and enabling you to have lower cognitive overhead and accelerate coding tasks. So you essentially have more time to focus on differentiated value creation. So for example, you can quickly accomplish more tasks in a short period of time, and then you're also able to complex or accomplish complex coding tasks with unfamiliar frameworks, APIs, SDKs, or any additional things. Next, we also have AWS developer productivity. So Codewhisperer is also optimized for AWS. So in addition to being, a great general purpose coding companion, Codewhisperer has been optimized for the used AWS APIs such as EC2, Amazon S3, AWS Lambda. So a lot of our services that we have in place. It suggests code that is more accurate and meets AWS best practices for using its services. Next, you can also use AI responsibly. You're able to easily meet software copyright and license attribution expectations with intelligent reference tracking. So Codewhisperer essentially helps you to make sure that you're coding responsibly by generating original code, identifying that the code is similar to known as open source code. So you can identify essentially if you want to use it and where it's coming from. In addition, Codewhisperer also provides enhanced application security. So you're able to scan the code that you have generated to find vulnerabilities such as crypto library best practices, AWS internal security best practices, and other practices that you have in place. You can also get suggestions to remediate detected code vulnerabilities as well. So from a security standpoint, you also have some features there that help you scan essentially what you have. Lastly, as we discussed earlier, it works with your favorite tools. So Codewhisperer supports all major programming languages and development environments. I'm not going to list them all out, but Codewhisperer supports a lot and will support a lot more in the future as we continue to innovate on behalf of our customers and users' best interests and recommendations. So now that we've covered Amazon Codewhisperer, let's get hands-on and move on to the demo. I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing and then move on to Visual Studio Code or VS Code. Hi everyone. So we're here in VS Code, and we're gonna go ahead and first off just start off by showing how can we install Codewhisperer into the specific IDE that we have here. So we can go ahead and go to extensions here on the left side, and we can just type in Codewhisperer, and the AWS toolkit will come up, which will include Codewhisperer right here. And I already have installed, so I'm not gonna go ahead and install it, but just install it and then connect this toolkit that we have here to your AWS environment, and we can go ahead and get started with what we have here. So I'm gonna go ahead and go back to AWS. You can see here Codewhisperer, it's enabled, so you can see auto suggestions. So for example, if I were to just type something, you would get that suggestion to pop up. I can pause that if I didn't want that to pop up, but I do have that on just so I can display the capabilities of Codewhisperer. So we're gonna start off with very basic code. So for example, let's just see the type of juices and see if we can create suggestions based off that. So I think it's recognizing orange as orange juice with the key values. Let's see. Let's just go ahead and go with that one. Let's go ahead and click tab, get that suggestion. Okay, so it's recognizing that orange and orange juice and apple with apple juice. Okay, let's see what other suggestions it has. So I can go ahead and see that there's two more suggestions that it has over here. I can click tab to just accept it or move on to the next word with the arrow key. So let's see, it's getting more sessions. Okay, it's getting more and more sessions. So let's go ahead and go with that. Let's see, how many sessions am I getting? Okay, so I'm getting a lot more. Now, why is this really important? Instead of typing out orange and orange juice, apple and apple juice, grape and grape juice, and also worrying about the syntax, the colons, the commas, um, the curly brackets, you really don't have to worry about all that stuff. And on top of that, you're saving a lot of time just not thinking about the specific suggestions you want. And then they're just generating based off Codewhisperer's coding assistant that we have here. So this is just a simple example of what we have here. Now let's say we want to change up the format of it. So let's just remove this over here. And we want to have ID as well. So let's have an ID associated with it. And let's have it as 1. Now, does it follow the same syntax throughout the other ones? Let's see. So click enter. Okay, so it does follow the same syntax, but does it follow the same syntax for other? Okay, for grape, for lemon, for mango. So you can see here that if I want to have a specific syntax like orange for orange juice, ID for one, for orange juice, you can follow that same syntax for the other types of juices as well, like apple juice, grape juice, lemon juice, mango juice, and it has a specific IDs associated with that, which are different from the from each other as well. So Codewhisperer is able to recognize that, hey, if I'm typing code, it's going to give me specific suggestions that are associated with the code that I'm writing. So for example, if I wanted to have a variable for type of juices and I create this uh, list dictionary here and I have these juices here, it's going to need more suggestions based off of those. So we see that whenever you're typing code and you see that you're getting more suggestions more and more the more you type. Now, what about comments? So let's just create a random comment to, I don't know, a function, or let's say let's be specific, create a function to calculate the area of a, okay, like it's exactly what I was looking for. Perfect. Area of a circle. I click tab and it's automatically created. So I don't have to Google that, hey, what's the area of a circle formula? It's already given. Um, you don't have to Google that, hey, if I want to have the area of a circle, what is the code that I necessarily need on Stack Overflow? You can go ahead and just get that from here. So based off this comment here. Now that's one example. Now let's get a little bit more complex. So let's do create a create a list of food items. Let's see if you can do that for me. Okay, what other suggestions it has. So it's just changing up the food names. That's completely fine. Let's just go with this. What we have here. I don't want to print the list. Instead, what I want to do is that for each item in the list, create a new DynamoDB. So let's go with the AWS friendly services that we have here. AWS DynamoDB table with the name of the item. Okay, let's see what it does here with the suggestion here. Try that one more time. Okay, so let's see. So I think it's printing it first. I think it also realizes that you have to import Boto 3 to use any AWS resources that we have here. So let's go ahead and go with suggestion here. Now, what else is it doing here? So it calls DynamoDB, has that resource associated with it. It's creating the table. Okay. What are suggestions? Let's speed up this process. So let's go with more suggestions. Okay. It has a specific ID associated with it. Okay. So why is this important? Why did I go through this? Well, for starters, you can see that the code builds upon each other. So if I have a variable called food items for specific food items that I want to go ahead and create a list of, I can also create a comment based off that specific list that I had above here for food items, and I can create a resource associated with that. So not only can you just do simple tasks, you can also do compounded tasks in a sense that you can build comments based off each other and generate code based off each item. And let's say I wanted to go ahead and go ahead and create this resource. You can go ahead and create that resource if you wanted to. So now that's one example. I do realize the code is not complete over here, but just wanted to go ahead and move on to the next example. Let's do something like, I don't know, get an average CPU utilization for a production instance. So let's go ahead and go here, get an average CPU utilization for a production instance. So I didn't even say create a function for it. Let's see what it does. Okay, obviously imports Photo 3. That's really important to have here. Now let's see what it does. Import date and time. Okay, time. Interesting. So let's go ahead and see what other suggestions we get. I don't think this is the right. Okay, there we go. It was importing a lot of other things that we really essentially didn't need. So one of the things I mentioned in the presentation was that it's really important to look through the suggestions that you have here. So if I didn't look through the suggestions and I was just looking at, hey, why is this importing stuff? Then you'd have different things. So for example, if I just wanted to just import stuff, then you're not really getting essentially anything done. You want to get that function out, right? So we import Boto 3 and we get straight into the function. So it's really important to look through suggestions and make sure that you're getting essentially what you want. If you're not looking at that, then you're going to be lost and you're coding essentially things that are not necessary. So in this case, we import our Boto3, we get our function out here, and then we can go ahead and build upon this as well. So the response associated with it, and let's see what response that I specifically want, what format do I want. So it builds upon the code and it's able to do that with what it has. Now, why is this really important? So let's go ahead and I can go here. Well, you're able to also bring in the AWS aspect for it. So if you're building AWS applications with the services that we have in place, then you can go ahead and do that. And also, one of the things that I mentioned throughout the presentation was that there's a reference log associated with the code that we have here. So for example, if I wanted to go to the code reference log, then one of the things that we did previously was we created a DynamoDB table, and you can see that the reference log associated with that, you can see where it comes from, Apache 2.0 from the repo over here, and it shows you exactly where the code was generated from, so you have an idea of kind of where it came from. So now that we have these samples, let's do one more last example. Let's do like a random function to have a very specific task to do. So I'm gonna go ahead and just copy and paste his comment so it makes it a little bit easier. So a function to load a CSV file from an S3 bucket into a pandas data frame with error handling. Now this is oddly specific. So let's see if it's able to do this task as well. So let's speed it up. Okay, so it's also recognizing that if I'm using a pandas data frame, I'm gonna have to import pandas as PD. So it's also having that note right here. So let's go ahead and accept that. And as you can see here at the top, import pandas as PD is done, and that specific task is done. And you can go ahead and just move on if you want to do more things with it. You can do more things with it. So now the biggest thing to get from this VS Code demo is that you're able to code not only just without comments, you're able to code with comments. And on top of that, you're able to build more and more and more. And on top of that, you also have many suggestions you can go with. So if you don't like the first suggestion that's giving you, you have maybe a second suggestion, a third suggestion, maybe a fourth suggestion that you can go with. And one of the things to keep in note is that your code isn't going to be perfect. Sometimes you want to customize code for your own specific need, your own specific purpose, building applications. So it's really important to understand that you may have to modify some of the code. This doesn't mean that it's for people who are not experienced as developers. This is primarily something that you want to have some little or a lot of experience developing in that specific language. This is not something that you can just walk in without having any coding experience at all. Okay, so now what we're going to do is that we talked about the open code reference log. What about the run security scan feature that we have here? So I went ahead and paused the recording and kind of took a look at some of the code that I needed for the security scan. So one of the features that we talked about was running security scans on any vulnerabilities that we have within our code. So for example, if you have any hard-coded credentials, which is something that is not recommended to do in the AWS environment. So we can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste some code that I went ahead and just wrote out. And I'm going to have this code right here. So this code right here imports Boto3, has imports logging as well. And we have our access key, and we also have our secret access key ID over here. Now, why it's really important to recognize is that we do not hard code AWS credentials within our code. Just for security purposes, it's something that is recommended in AWS best practices. And AWS best practices is something that we talked about that the security scan does scan as well in terms of the secret access key ID and the access key ID as well. So if I run the scan, it should be able to scan that, hey, this is something that is not recommended for best practices in general. So we're going to go ahead and scan this. It's going to have here on the bottom right, and it's going to tell me hard-coded credentials, access credentials, as passwords, access keys should not be hard-coded. And then it's also going to give me APIs that are not recommended or founded. So these are the APIs that are recommended or not founded. We also have a logging injection over here that's telling you that, hey, this is something that you probably don't want. So throughout your code, this is only 19 lines. Maybe you have hundreds of lines of code. You can go ahead and just run a security scan throughout it, and it will tell you some of the problems that it may run into, if it's concerning or not, and kind of severity associated with it, and how it can be essentially avoided. And it's going to give you a specific line as well associated with that specific code that we have here. So this is the demo that we have on VS Code, and we're going to go ahead and move on to another environment. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to AWS Lambda. which is within. I'm gonna do that in console. So within the AWS console, I'm gonna have a Lambda function and kind of talk about how can we use Codewhisperer within the AWS console, specifically with Lambda. Hi everyone, so we're here in the AWS console, specifically in the AWS Lambda console. You can go ahead and just click Lambda here, type in Lambda here at the top, search bar, select Lambda, go ahead and create your Lambda function with the basic default options and default execution role. And you can go ahead and just name it. I just named it Code Whisperer Demo. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and enable Code Whisperer. So you can go ahead and go to Tools, just enable Amazon Code Whisperer, Code Suggestions. Once you enable it, you will have that check mark next to it. So you can go back to it and just make sure there's a check mark next to it. If you do not have access to it, there'll be a red bar that pops up here at the top telling you that, hey, you do not have access to it. What you can do is you can reach out to your administrator, and the administrator can attach the Code Whisperer policy to your user, and that will give you access to Code Whisperer. So you can go ahead and enable it and get here. Essentially, what we're going to test is we're going to test the functionality that we saw on VS Code and test that same functionality or code suggestions in Lambda. So let's just create a random function. Create a function to verify email addresses. So I'm on Mac. To get the suggestions, I go ahead and click option C, and it gives me that suggestion to create that function here. I'm going to go with that. What other suggestions does it give me? So it gives me these suggestions as well. Now, the biggest thing to get out of this is that the same functionality that we had in a different IDE or different environment, we have that same functionality in Lambda. And we can go ahead and try that with something to do with an AWS service as well. And it can go ahead and recognize that as well. So we're going to go ahead and create a function, create a function to upload a file to a S3 bucket. So let's see, we have our function here. And as you can see here, so one of the things that CodeWhisperer can also do is generate comments. So one of the biggest things as a developer is that sometimes you have non-developers or individuals who are not so friendly with code read your code, and comments are really, really important. So you can go ahead and generate comments as well on Lambda and other IDEs as well. So it's the same functionality. So this pretty much includes the demo portion of Amazon Code Whisper. We went ahead and started off this presentation by talking about the challenges that developers face. We talked about what exactly is Amazon Code Whisper and how is it going to make this process a lot easier with helping developers, and then kind of moved on with the hands-on portion, as into how can we test these features that we have when it comes to the reference logs, when it comes to the security scans, when it comes to the suggestions that we're getting, how far can a developer truly go? And that statistic that we tested where developers are X amount of percentage going to develop faster, is that really true? So throughout this demo, we went ahead and tested all of these features and all these functionalities, and we really got an understanding what CodeWhisperer can really go. This pretty much concludes the presentation and the demo portion. So thank you guys for watching this demo, and I hope you guys got a lot out of this presentation. Thank you so much.